What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. We're back doing another preview video for the final weekend of the World Cup warm-up games before we get to that amazing World Cup happening in just a couple of weeks' time. Of course, in these preview videos is where we check out the official teams that have been announced to be playing on the weekend, have a run through the list of players who we think some good picks, some bad picks, some thoughts on how we think the teams might play, a couple of stats along the way for a bit of fun, and finally, of course, that all-important score prediction, which I've actually done quite well with over the course of the warm-ups. If you enjoy this style of video, make sure to drop it a like, and if you want to see more from the channel, you want to support your rugby channels on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because we'll be doing these videos all throughout the World Cup. There's going to be so many coming out, so that way you get to be kept in the loop. This one is going to be for Scotland versus Georgia. As the crocodile's showing off, I've decided to try and incorporate this crocodile a bit more, so I've given him a whiteboard with the teams on. There we go. I don't really know if that adds a lot to it, but you know what? At least it's something in the background. At least we know who we're talking about. I'll just wait for 2 Senses lawyers to drop me a message to say, like, you can't use a whiteboard in a rugby video. It's not allowed. Right, anyway, let's talk about some actual rugby. I'm getting distracted. So, Scotland versus Georgia, a game this weekend I'm actually really looking forward to. Scotland go into this as favourites, right? You know, the team's been performing really well. They've had a couple of really good games recently against France, who, you know, were going in as one of the teams looking to potentially win this World Cup. The performances by Scotland have looked, you know, very impressive. Georgia are ranked much lower in the world rankings, but Georgia are a team I'm really looking forward to seeing this one. They've been on a bit of a win streak recently. There's been a lot going on for Georgia. They beat the USA, Romania, Portugal, Romania again, Spain, the Netherlands, Germany, and then of course Wales back in November of last year. They're on a bit of a hot streak, and they are performing well. I got to see some highlights from that game against the USA, and they were looking pretty good. So Scotland will have to keep a bit of an eye out for this game, because I think Georgia could bring something exciting this one. Of course, they're also in there in that pool C with Australia, Fiji, and Wales. It's the chance for one of the teams sort of in the the tier 2 side of rugby to potentially qualify from that pool. All very exciting. Starting out then with the home team of Scotland coming in for this one: Jamie Batty, Dave Cherry, and WP Nell. Of course, Xander Fagerson still missing out after his red card incident. So WP Nell coming in for this one. Nice to see Dave Cherry back, and I feel like I haven't read that name for Scotland for quite a while. While it's maybe not, you know, the starting front row you'd be expecting to see in a Scotland team when we get into those big games in the World Cup against like Ireland and South Africa and stuff, injury concerns this weekend are really prevalent for every game, really, because an injury here rules players out of a World Cup, and you really can't afford it. So you've got to put out a good enough team that they're getting the minutes in. You're going to be able to win the game. You carry that momentum ahead to the World Cup. It's the last chance for you to get some minutes in. But yeah, injuries are going to be a big concern for them. So we'll see how this front row gets on, because the Georgian forward pack is also pretty monstrous. So they might look to contest this. We'll see how they get on. In the lock department then, Sam Skinner and Grant Gilchrist taking over. Neither of the Gray brothers in this weekend. They do have quite a good depth for lock department for Scotland. We've got Scott Cummings on the bench as well. Sam Skinner started on the bench for the France game last week. Grant Gilchrist taking that vice-captaincy role as well. I'm not too caught up on the Georgian line-out. Unfortunately, a lot of the Georgian games aren't sort of televised over in the UK. They're really hard to catch, or they are, at least for me. I can't find anywhere to watch them. So I'm not caught up with all that, but it'll be an area that I'll be, you know, keeping a big eye on as we get towards that World Cup to see how Georgia are performing there. The back row unchanged from the team that went up against France: Jamie Ritchie, Rory Darge, and Jack Dempsey. And Jamie Ritchie getting back in with his captaincy and played really well in that France game. Nice to see. Another player joining him though, Jack Dempsey. Jack Dempsey, a very, very aggressive player with the ball in hand, smashing his way through again. Another one that had quite a good game against France the other week. Ben White and Finn Russell will be taking over the halfback partnership for this game. So nice to see Ben White's name back in. I was so worried with his injury that he picked up a couple of weeks back that I thought, he's out, he's gone, you know, he's not going to be able to get to that World Cup. So nice to see him there. Going to be testing any sort of injuries just to make sure you're all okay. And Georgian players hit hard, right? You're going to want to keep him pretty safe just to make sure you're going in with all of your major assets in terms of your scrum halves. Finn Russell, I did think maybe we would get to see Ben Healy for this game. You know, of course, Finn Russell's Finn Russell. He's always going to want to be in the team as a starting fly half. But again, injury concerns. I feel like Blair Kinghorn's been much better at fullback. I wouldn't be looking at Blair Kinghorn for 10, even though he can play there. Ben Healy against a team like Georgia, I thought might have had a bit more beneficial to have a run out against a team like Georgia. Maybe they'll go for a half and half for this one. Finn Russell taking the first half, Ben Healy going to take that second half. We'll see how that goes. In the centre partnership, Tui Pelotu and Hugh Jones. So they've gone, you know, top tier for that centre partnership. Chris Harris is on the bench. There's a lot of talk about Chris Harris not getting a look into this team. You know, go back a couple of years, this guy was in the Lions. He was crushing it for Scotland in the Six Nations. And to be honest, like I think he's struggling to get into this team. I only saw him play that first half against Italy right at the start of the World Cup warm-ups, and not a great half for him either. So, you know, Hugh Jones and Tuipulotu, probably a main starting choice there. But nice to see they've given, Georgia the respect with this back line, to be fair. There's some really top-tier names for the Scotland team. Alongside them then, Duhan van der Merwe on the left wing, Darcy Graham and Ollie Smith taking over the fullback duties for this week. So, it's a pretty good team. It's not that many changes from the team that went up against France. So, Scotland giving the respect to Georgia. They've put on a decent team. You know, you can't rule Georgia out. They beat Wales back in November. You can't rule this team out. I like the back line. One thing I was looking at from watching the highlights of the Georgia-USA game, the only try that USA scored in that game came from actually being to run around the outside of the Georgian wingers. Georgia can potentially have a bit of a tendency to defend a little bit narrowly, and it was the one try that the USA scored came from being able to outrun the wingers on the outside, and then had a player on his shoulder to run over for the try. Now, Scotland have pacey wingers, right? Darcy Graham and Duhan van der Merwe, they'll get on the outside of you. So I imagine Georgia will have looked at that game last week and be thinking, we need to just improve that area, because if Duhan van der Merwe gets on the outside of you, it's hard enough to tackle him anyway when you're one-on-one, but if he's already got past you a bit, you're going to really struggle. And Darcy Graham, likewise, can outstep you. I think for Scotland and what we've seen in the build-up game so far against France, Scotland have really been working on the pace at getting the ball shipped wider quicker from the back of the ruck. So it might be that all that training they've been putting in to get towards the World Cup actually really, really helps them out in this game. And then in the replacements, Ewan Ashman, Sutherland and Sebastian will be coming on in that second half front row. Scott Cummings and Matt Fagerson are your replacement forwards coming on. So there's, a nice little bolster there to come on. So hopefully Scott Cummings gets a bit of game time as well. I'm hoping maybe he does a half and half. I would maybe even like to see Sam Skinner and Scott Cummings play together a bit more. Grant Gilchrist is in the team. He's going to be in every single game, right? He's an absolute workhorse. Maybe give Scott Cummings a bit of time in the game for that second half and really get some minutes in. And then the replacement backs, George Horn, Ben Healy, and Chris Harris. Like I said, I feels like I already would have maybe had Ben Healy starting this one, because I feel like he would have a lot to gain from playing a team like Georgia. Most likely he'll probably be the first choice fly half to play some of the tier 2 teams in Pool B with how big the games are against Ireland and South Africa. You don't want to risk injuries to Finn Russell. So I would imagine Ben Healy gets that start against those teams. So against Georgia, I think it would be a really good warm-up for him. Moving on then to the Georgian team. Now, I'll preface this a little bit by saying, sort of like I had with the Fiji team last week, I'm no expert in Georgian rugby. I try and find any games I can do. I try and watch highlights, but I'll never be able to go quite as in-depth with the Georgian team as I can do with with the Six Nations teams. I'm not some sports journalist. I don't work for BT or Sky Sports. I'm just me in my spare room. But from the names that I do know in this Georgian team, it's at least putting out a pretty solid team. It's what you'd expect going up against Scotland at home. They've got certainly a pretty solid front row there with Nariashvili, Mamoukiashvili and Gigiashvili. For anyone who's new to the Georgian rugby team, there's a lot of Yashvilis and Adzes. So if you're a bit like me and you're trying to get to learn a few more names, don't be too disheartened if you get mixed up along the way. But it's a solid front row from the Georgia pack. Georgia love their forward work as well, even against that game that I saw against the USA. Going up against for like the driving mauls and stuff look powerful. They'll love going in at the set piece. They'll want to try and dominate that area. And the backs can launch really well. I was watching the attacks sort of plan from Georgia in that USA game, and I think they've been watching a lot of Ireland play. The way they try and ship the ball out wide, but they're using the fullback to cut back inside against the grain. So they're going out to the distributors, whether it's at 10 or at centre, and then actually passing back inside to cut back against the grain and go their way. Scotland actually do a similar sort of style with the attack as well. So keep an eye out for that, especially in this one, to see how the guard gets on around the ruck for Scotland, because if you leave a door open, one of these lads will run through. And there's a lot of pace in this Georgian backs team as well. Lobjanidze in that scrum half position is an incredibly fast player. He's one of the most experienced players now, surely, in this Georgian team. He's the name I expect to see in that scrum half. Sharakadze and Topladze in that centre combo as well. Major experienced player. Sharakadze, such a passion for this Georgia team as well. Again, another very pacey player for this Georgia team, as well as Nini Yashvili in that fullback position. So there's a solid set of players in this Georgian team, but they will be looking to cause some upsets. One area that's jumped out to me there, actually, Matt Carver in the fly half position is not a name I know. Abshan Dadze is on the bench for Georgia this week, and that would be typically who I would think would be starting at a fly half for Georgia. So I'm sure this is a bit more of a younger lad. Looking him up now very quickly. He's only 21, the lad playing at fly half in this game. So we'll see how he gets on in terms of his kicking duties and stuff. Not something I know, unfortunately, as we build towards that World Cup and we see a few more of these teams actually being televised and being able to take a bit away from those pools and stuff. Hopefully, my own knowledge will increase. It's one of the joys of rugby, guys. There's always something new to learn. Player rosters are always changing, and keeping up to date with some of the tier 2 teams and the lower ranked teams, is something I personally enjoy, but it takes a little bit of time to get there. So in terms of a score prediction for this one, Scotland, Georgia, what do we think? Well, Scotland have loaded up on a pretty decent team, to be fair. Georgia have been on a good win streak. It's actually very surprising how many points Georgia have been scoring on average. It's got to be pretty high. They beat the USA 22 points to 7. They beat Romania 56-6. They beat Portugal 38-11, and Portugal have been beating other teams as well this year. Georgia beat Romania 31-7. They beat Spain 41-3. They beat the Netherlands 40-8. They beat Germany 75-12. They are getting up high in terms of the points being scored. So, don't put it past the fact that this team will score points. They will take, the 3 points when they're on offer, but they absolutely can score tries. So I imagine they'll certainly get over the scoreboard a couple of times. The Scottish defence will be tested, but Scotland, of course, likewise have so many different attacking backs. They'll be scoring some big points as well for this one. And I imagine they'll think about it a bit more test level, thinking about that World Cup, treat it like a test, take the 3 points when they're on offer. If you're not going anywhere, take a drop goal, take the 3 points, head back, reset yourselves and go back up again. I'm going to say a Scotland win for this one. And I think I'll sort of extend it out a little bit, but Georgia have given some tier 1 teams some rough old games in the past. I'll say Scotland by 11. That's going to be my score prediction, guys. Make sure you drop yours down in the comment section, as well as your thoughts on the teams, because I really do enjoy having a read through them. Make sure you're getting your picks up on Superbrew as well. Of course, we have the New Zealand-South Africa game happening on Friday, so make sure you're locking those in before that game kicks off on Friday, just to make sure that your picks are all safe, because I'm not really sure how Superbrew works when you've got a Friday game on. I hope you've all enjoyed this one today, guys. I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.